Hello, and welcome to the presentation of The Black Death. My name is Marilyn Murray. This is for Honors Humanities class with Dr. Dixon. The Black Death was a plague that was around for a few hundred years. Um, it killed over 23 million people from 1348 to 1720. Well, let's take a look at what the Black Death was. The Black Death was a virus from a strain of Yersinia pestis. And rats have a natural immunity to this virus. It does not affect them in any way, but they were carriers of it. When a flea would hop onto a rat and bite the flea could not digest this virus. So when the flea hopped off the rat to a human host, it would bite a human and kind of regurgitate that virus into the bloodstream of a human. Rats were so overpopulated in cities because some of the people thought that cats, which is the natural predator to rats, cats were satanic, so they didn't want cats around. So cats were more or less on farms, not anywhere in the city. And if they just had more cats, that maybe could have stopped the spread of the overpopulation of rats and stopped the spread of the Black Death. The Black Death is thought to have began with the Mongolians. They were in battle trying to take over the city of Kaffa. Kaffa was the hub for all the major trade routes for ships in the Black Sea, and they wanted this city. The problem was they started becoming very sick, and they had gotten this plague virus. The virus acts very, very, very quickly, which means it can kill someone within the same day of them getting the disease. So, in a last kind of a ditch effort to try to take over this city, they decided to catapult their dead over the walls into the city. Kind of like if we can't have it, you can't either. And of course, that disease just started to spread. When the Black Death hit the city of Kaffa, people really started to get worried and decide to go ahead and sell their ships out and get on their trade routes and to get away from this kind of a virus and plague. The problem was is the people on the ships that had already been exposed to it were sick, and if one person's sick, then the whole ship's going to get sick. They were en route to places like China, Central Asia, and to Europe, and the whole while they're carrying this death plague with them. Once the ships landed in the trade routes at their ports, people from that area would come to the ship to get the supplies out, and they would normally find the whole ship dead. Everyone would be dead in the bottom or dying. This exposed them to the virus because it was airborne. And when they come back into the cities, everyone, it would be spread very quickly. They had a saying that you get up that morning and feel fine, and death could come take you by that night. It was so bad, in fact, that if someone in your family, even your child or husband or elderly person, started to become sick, they would leave them literally in the streets just to die. They wouldn't even bring them back home. Some of the cities had orders that if someone was sick in that family, they made them board up the windows and the doors, and they would not let them leave. So they were stuck in there with the person dying, and they normally got the virus as well. The Black Death and plague was so bad and it spread so quickly that a lot of people felt like it was the end of times. And a lot of people either turned to spiritual beliefs, thinking it was a punishment from God, and others turned to drinking and eating and being very promiscuous because they also thought it was the end of times. And the way this virus would kill you is it was airborne and also through any of the saliva or any of the bodily fluids. And it would go into the body and it would literally just start to liquefy the lungs. So they would be coughing up all this phlegm, but part of it was lung tissue they were coughing up. So they would die. I mean, they coughed their lungs up to the point of this liquidation of their lungs, and that's how they died. It was very, very quick. They also would have the big black kind of like a bull polyp that would come up on the neck, groin areas, and underneath the arms. And that's where the word black came from, because these big spots would come up, and that was kind of the end, near the end that was coming. And of course, anytime you have a major plague or disease that strikes an area that causes spiritual belief to rise, you can also get extremists that can come out of that. In this time period, it was called the Phalangans. And what they were individuals that would take off their shirt, walk through the streets, and basically take like a leather whip and beat themselves with it to the point they bled. They felt like they were trying to repent themselves for God. They felt like also that the Jewish community was responsible for the disease. And the thing is, they would travel from town to town to town to show their obedience to God. But the problem was, is when they were whipping themselves, all they were doing was kind of spreading the virus even more without knowing they were doing that. The death rate of the Black Death was so horrible. It was one out of every three people on average that died. So if you can imagine looking at your family right now, and if there's three people or four or even six, think about your grandparents or siblings, out of every three, one would die. And a lot of times, if the husband was out hunting and his wife had contracted the disease, he would come back home to find his wife and children dead. Or the same thing, vice versa. Sometimes the women were out managing the farm for a while and the older children were running the inside. She could come back in by the end of the day and also find them very sick or dead. So it was just a very emotionally dark time for these people that's just trying to survive and live. And like many natural disasters, you always have people coming out that want to make a couple extra dollars. And here comes the plague doctors. They did not have any knowledge, of course, of antibiotics back then. So what they would do is they would go out to check on the sick and try to make them as comfortable as possible, because they knew there was no cure for this, by giving them medications. But they would charge a pretty large fee to do this. And, unfortunately, they made money off dying people, literally. They're known for their very unusual outfits, and let me tell you a little bit about this bird-looking guy here. The long dress-like jacket they wore that was actually made out of leather, and the leather was waxed, and that helped. Unbeknown to them, it helped keep fleas off of that, because fleas couldn't attach to that leather. They also wore leather gloves. They had a headpiece that went around the back of their head. And then, of course, the beak looking mask was made out of leather with the goggles so they could see out of it. Now, what they would do, they thought the bad smell of people dying is what made you sick. We know now that it was the airborne virus that made people sick, but what they did is they stuffed into that beak with different kinds of things that would smell good, like flowers or herbs, and that did keep that airborne virus from traveling to them. So in a way, it kind of saved them. Now, of course, no plague doctor would go out without wearing his nice top hat and a cane. The cane served as a double purpose, not only for walking and appearing as a gentleman, but also to keep people away. He could kind of look at it, someone that was very sick, without getting too close to them and them touching him. So that is our plague doctor. So the spread of the Black Death was very quick, because it traveled from Kaffa into Italy, France, Europe. It even went to Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, Poland, and even Egypt. It just kind of traveled everywhere. No one was really safe, no matter where you lived, from the Black Death. Even though the Black Death killed so many people, there was a good side to the plague if you survived it. Many of the peasants that survived this plague, where there were so few people left in the labor force, were able to ask for more money to farm the lands, to raise the animals and the crops. They were also able to eat a better diet, which included meat from cows. People that survived the plague, they did end up living longer. The average before the plague hit was only 10% of the people living to be 70 years old. This almost doubled their chances of living to be 70 after the plague. When I read about the Black Death, the first thing I thought about was COVID-19. It in a way as a modern day plague that we're fighting now. It spread extremely quickly and it spread to millions of people in the world. Like the Black Death, COVID-19 has spread very quickly throughout our country, our counties, and our communities. We as a world have tried to take different precautions to stop the spread of the COVID, but it has spread very quickly. The World Health Organization, also nicknamed as WHO, has presented a couple different ways to help us stop the spread of the COVID-19. They've advised us to wash our hands several times a day, to make sure when we do wash our hands, to do it for about 20 seconds, 30 seconds. And then after we do that, it's good to sanitize our hands and to make sure we're in a mask and a facial barrier. And just like the Black Death, the COVID-19 virus has spread very quickly throughout the whole world. It's presented us all with new hurdles that we've had to overcome in our country. Anything from working from home instead of going to the office, from doing schoolwork and classwork at home instead of going to the college. In closing, the Black Death was a very powerful virus that killed millions of human lives. The results of the deaths created better conditions for most peasants and increased the estimated length of life. In modern days, we fight a new virus called COVID-19, and with no antivirus yet developed. Many of humans have died from this virus as well. With newer knowledge, we can better steps to stay healthy while fighting this virus. Hopefully, one day we will have a cure. I hope you've enjoyed watching this presentation of the Black Death. I appreciate you guys so much for your feedback, and thank you for watching.